Could we please start with the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Awesome. So welcome to our joint meeting with the Town Council and Planning Board. We don't usually do a roll call, but I was thinking it would be good just so we can make sure everyone's familiar with each other and our names. I'm going to start in this corner and then we'll just introduce ourselves and go all the way down.
Andrea Baranik, Planning Board.
Bill DeVisis, Planning Board.
Sam Wilcox, Town Council.
Pete Burton, Planning Board. Mark Reynolds, Town Council.
Dan Madnick, Town Council.
Michelle Martell, Planning Board.
Jeff Dinsmore, Town Council.
Dana Millar, Planning Board.
Jim Palmisano, Town Council.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Speak into your microphone. All right, so we're kicking off our joint workshop. I know we have a memo from our town planner. Should I kick it over to you to
Yeah,
explain further? Thank you so much.
I'm just gonna read my memo into the record, because I think it's a lot of valuable information for the board and the council's consideration.
Mhm.
The entire memo.
Yes, the entire memo.
7 pages.
I'll
We
send
just-
it.
It's above your seven, we just
Seven
summarize it,
pages, Sally.
please.
If it's long and it might take you a long time to read, I feel like that might be a good idea just to, instead of reading 7 pages, summarize.
Was not planning on summarizing it, to be honest with you. I'll just say some of the most important things, which are that special use permits are one of the few remaining mechanisms that allow the planning board to be involved in and the public to be informed of development applications, because the definition of what a minor land development project is has changed. There are now 7 different categorizations of projects that now, as long as they don't have a street creation extension or require a variance or a special use permit, it is all handled by the administrative officer, which is not something that I have been a proponent of at any point in time. I think that the planning board plays a vital role in reviewing applications. So I did give you some information about just the basics of the zoning ordinance and why I recommended some of the proposed, language in past drafts. And then I gave some additional information about special use permit parameters and what you could be considering as part of your discussion. There are certain things that I know have been discussed that some parties do not think should be part of the special use permit criteria. I would also just note that our regulations were not meant to be static documents. They can change over time, and they should. If we find that we have made a use that has been permitted by a special use permit comes too onerous, we can always come back and review it again. All of our regulations should be, I think, living, breathing documents. So that would be my summary.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really detailed, comprehensive summary. I think we've all read it though, since it's not a public hearing. It's just kind of trying to move things along.
Totally fine.
But just one clarification, Talia. So the 7 categories of projects that can be pursued without any review of the planning board, but you still have the ability to recommend that the board reviews those.
No,
No,
nope,
not at all.
not at all. I can ask for recommendations from you, but it's not as though I'm bound by having the planning board provide any input for minor applications.
Okay, and it's just for minor applications.
Well, so minor applications are a wide range of different things, which is 7,500 gross square feet of floor area of new commercial, manufacturing, or industrial development or less, an expansion of up to 50% of existing floor area or up to 10,000 square feet for commercial, manufacturing, or industrial structures, mixed-use development consisting of up to 6 dwelling units and 2,500 gross square feet of commercial space or less, multifamily residential or residential condominium development of 9 units or less, a change in use of the property where no extensive construction of improvements is sought, or an adaptive reuse project up to 25,000 square feet of gross floor area located in a commercial zone where no extensive exterior construction of improvements is sought, or an adaptive reuse project located in a residential zone that results in less than 9 residential units. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, if no street creation or extension, variance, or special use permits are required, the administrative officer will approve, deny, or approve with conditions the preliminary plan for a minor land development or subdivision. So there are going to be projects that you might never even know are happening until after they've been approved. That's what state law now allows.
Okay, so when we're looking at uses that we want to require special use permits, probably the main benefit, as you pointed out, is that those special use permits will come to the planning board.
Yes.
Regardless of whether or not it meets these criteria that you just mentioned, those 7 criteria.
Yes.
That's the real benefit, I guess, when we look at special use permits and where we really want to use them. That's probably one of the biggest, benefits when we're talking about certain uses. Okay, thanks.
Of course.
All right. No other comments from anybody else? Do we want to discuss past actions and why we're here today as well, Talia? I know, I can just go over it briefly. The planning board, I know you guys spent a long time going through each individual use. And I know you did as well, Talia. That's appreciated. Came to council once. We asked for further detail, more instruction, more specific and objective criteria. That's the key word. Words. Went back to the planning board. Some revisions were made, came back to the town council, but some of our questions were still lingering. So that's when we decided to have this joint workshop. And Phil and I had met with staff to create a little bit of an agenda going into item 2 here of what we discussed to see if the planning board needed any questions from council. That way we can just answer them directly. I guess we'll dive right into that if that works. I think I see Jim's hand go on. Did you have, okay, I'm just making sure.
Yeah, I think Sam,
Okay, let's do
just to kind of go a little further on that.
Yeah.
So I think the outcome we're looking for from this meeting is the board realized we need to do, most of the heavy lifting on this, and we're the ones that need to take this back to the board. We need to work on it and then hopefully get something to you, the next submission that is, at least more in line with what you were looking for. So yeah, we're not really looking to resolve issues here, but we like to at least have a clear understanding of what the council is looking for. So when it comes back to the board, we can provide you with a product that you're happy with.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so 2A is buffer sizes or buffer.
So, point of
Which-
information,
yeah.
I think it would be really helpful for this discussion if we have our zoning map. It's really difficult to go through the uses and not understand exactly where right now in the town they're actually able to be permitted or not permitted. But zoning map is key. It's not that the zoning map can't change, but you have to kind of look at things in the
Yeah.
context of what we have currently. I was just hoping that our town admin can put that up on the screen. If there are any questions.
I lost connection, but I will.
We'll see if we can hear it. So during council discussion, buffers were brought up. I believe they brought up by Councilor Madnick. Is that correct? So I was hoping to maybe shift it over to you, see if you wanted to add more detail to the planning board.
Well, if I may,
Yeah.
I'll suggest another process. So Phil and I had a long discussion this morning while I was stuck in traffic. And one of the things we discussed, which I don't know if I convinced Phil if he was interested or not, is we're kind of, the town is kind of stuck in an awkward position right now because any special use permit, if someone were to apply for one, is permitted by right.
I know.
Because we don't have objective criteria for someone to really apply for a special use permit and say, all right, what do I need to do? So we kind of have 2 paths, right? One of the reasons why we're back here is because we didn't feel that as a community, we had objective criteria. And I looked at it as like, if I'm an applicant, I say, all right, I got a special use permit. And one of the things happen to be buffers.
Right.
Different uses are gonna have different buffer requirements. But I'm an advocate and I say, well, hey, I need a buffer, and the planning board says, I think 25 feet's good. But, then the next applicant says, yeah, I need a buffer, and the planning board says, I think 50 feet. Well, then it's arbitrary. And you can't really make decisions that are arbitrary. So the buffer is one example, but we need to decide as a community right now whether we want to spend the time and let the planning board give them the proper time to set these criteria for us to adopt a regulation that we have to stand by. Because at the end of the day, it's not just the planning board and the council, but all of us together, we all live here. When we adopt this, we own the consequences. And that's why I pushed back on actually adopting something I didn't think was ready.
Mhm.
As an engineering standpoint, I looked at it and said, yeah, these requirements are not clear for me. And I'm coming in and saying, yeah, I can't do this. So one of the things that Phil and I discussed this morning is, and this is something that maybe we can discuss quickly, it's up to you guys. Do we take all special use permits right now and we prohibit them until we get through this? Or do we just let it ride and work through it in the couple months it might take us? I don't know how long.
So I'll tell you, Sam, first,
We
go ahead.
discussed that very issue at the planning board, and that was not something the planning board was interested in pursuing.
Well,
I provided 3 different drafts to the planning board. One was all S's are X, all S's are P. And then I did another one where it was creating specific criteria for different use codes. And ultimately, the decision that was rendered was that they wanted to retain special use permits. So.
Again,
Right, hold on, point of order. So I don't want everyone talking over each other because that gets very complicated. But I'm gonna chime in because I do recall during the first meeting we had with council, I asked that question, like, if we prohibit these uses, will that mean the planning board will continue to work on this? Because that's a strategy that other communities had taken. And the response I'd received at the time was that no, it wouldn't. And I think that's why we're here today, is because there's a little gap in communication between the planning board and the council. And we wanted to overcome that gap. Because I remember pointing that out during that first interaction. And that was the response I received. I'm gonna now turn it over to Phil.
I was gonna say, I don't see any reason why we couldn't use that as a stopgap, just in the interim, just make those, as Dan said, make those prohibited uses. And then that gives us, the planning board time to really dive into this and spend, at least a few workshops on this before we turn it back to the council. And then that way it eliminates that risk, because right now, quite honestly, we'd be at risk for any one of those special uses. If it would be considered a permitted use at this point. But yeah, I don't think we'd want to. So Talia, I understand what you're saying. When it came to the board, I think that we were looking at the possibility of, at the time, should we just prohibit it entirely, or should we keep working on it? We decided to keep working on it, but in light of how much effort this has taken, and now really after getting feedback from the council, knowing that, I'm thinking, I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
Damn it, you're starting to change my
Hold
mind. Phil.
Well, no,
Finish.
Peter, I'm thinking for us to go through workshops on this, we're gonna need dedicated workshops, and there's gonna be, we can only afford one a month really, because we're kind of straight out with other stuff. I'm thinking the best we're gonna do before we can get a draft out to council is it's gonna take us 3 months of workshops, and then it's gonna go to you guys, and then you're gonna have to review it, and you're probably gonna have some, feedback, and we're probably at minimum 6 months before we can get something approved.
That makes sense. Did you have something you want to add, Pete?
It does basically, listen, I see your point. We thought perhaps we could just, plow through this and get it done, but, you raised some questions, and understandably so, and, I haven't done this before, but it looks like it will take quite a while to really get it right.
Yeah.
And it does protect the town, and then we don't do a half-arsed job of doing it, and there's no reason to.
Any other thoughts on that? All right, I don't see any other thoughts, but is this a type of agenda we can make a motion? Because we would have to advertise all of those uses as a public hearing in order to prohibit them. Is that correct?
Can't take any definitive action tonight because it wasn't advertised as a public hearing.
I can provide you with a copy of the material that I prepared for the planning board as part of the all S's are X. which is where all special use permits would become prohibited.
Right, I think my question is like, I know it's not a public hearing, but could we can't advertise for a public hearing based on the way this is written. All right. Yeah,
So you could make a recommendation motion that it be presented for authorization to propose those uses as suggested, then council would authorize for public hearing. those uses.
Right.
Be a two-stage.
okay.
So you could make a motion of direction tonight.
Yeah, just thinking timeline, our agenda deadline was today and the agenda, I believe, has been posted. So it might just be worth putting in a request, unless somebody wants to throw a motion. I heard Mark.
We still have 48 hours before our meeting. We can add to that agenda.
All right,
Why can't we just make a recommendation that we add that item to Tuesday's agenda?
let's do it.
So we can not
Monday's
wait.
holiday, you have tomorrow,
Would you kindly put that into a form of a motion for us?
Friday.
So I'll make a motion to recommend that an item be added to the town council agenda for next Tuesday's meeting to consider advertising for public hearing amendments to chapter 18.16 use table to convert all special use permitted activities to prohibited.
Second.
We got our motion, our second. Any discussion? I want to say council discussion, but planning board as well. Yeah, sure.
I
go ahead,
just have a
Michelle.
question. Is there any way to add like a caveat to that to say temporarily or it's because it sounds permanent? And I know we have intentions, but that was our goal, was to not prohibit everything because I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the planning board felt very strongly that we do not prohibit them all. And so that without having kind of a caveat that we will be, making them special use permits again.
So
Yeah, so yeah, sure. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say, my original thought was, we don't prohibit them, we keep them permitted, and that will give the planning board the incentive to get it done, because. But, so, I mean, that was my original thought, if we keep them permitted, they're gonna have, well, we
Right.
gotta get this done, so, but I get Phil's point that, we don't wanna get,
We're, the
I got
problem is
Andrea
we're
then.
we're at risk, that's the problem.
Yeah,
No, I totally get it, and that's why I didn't say
And
it.
believe me, I'm not trying to defer this and kick it down the road. I mean, the board wants to address this, and we originally wanted to address it more thoroughly, but we knew we had kind of a short fuse to get something out.
So
I
what-
got Andrea and then Talia.
Yeah, I thinking through, okay, we're here today for this meeting to go over the council's concerns and questions. The planning board, as a board, we provided and spent lots of time on reviewing the special use permits and which ones we wanted to keep, which ones we said no, to not allow. And to your point, I'm concerned that if we're gonna say to not allow these, it kind of almost eliminates all the work we've done, right?
Yeah.
And I know that's not the intent, that in essence, this was a temporary kind of thought, just to kind of be safe.
All right, I got Talia
Okay.
next.
If you want it to be that the uses that are permitted by special use permit are permitted, you don't have to do anything, because right now,
They're permanent.
they're permitted. You don't have to send it to a public hearing, you don't have to advertise, you don't have to do anything. So if the ultimate disposition is that you want to spend time working on this, then spend time working on it. If you want to prohibit those uses that were previously permitted by special use permit, then yeah, you're going to have to make a change. But if that's not the intention of those assembled here, then you can just let sleeping dogs lie and we get applications and they're not subject to special use permit requirements.
Problem right now is if, for example, I'm just using any example, say somebody decides they want to put in a campground. Campground is, listed as, a use requiring a special use permit. That is a permitted use. And we have no criteria, we have nothing. They will just put in a campground. And we'd have really very little say in that. And we will be at risk, just so everybody knows, and that's why Dan and I were discussing, well, as an interim, I don't really want to call it a moratorium, but we would be protecting the town from, that type of development. And until at which point the board can go back and do a thorough job at providing criteria for special use permits and then get that back to council.
Yeah.
The intention, is not, we're not gonna leave this as prohibited forever.
Yeah, so that would be my thought as well. And that's what I wanted to do from the beginning was prohibit it. But to answer your question, Michelle, I don't really know if we can say like, we're gonna prohibit it for a year, we can prohibit it for 6 months. I don't want to necessarily put you guys to that timeline. If you don't want everything prohibited, then we can get something sooner, later. But it would be, I guess, permanent until otherwise changed, which it could be changed over time. I saw Tally hands, then Counselor Madnix.
I really wish that the solicitor were here because then I could ask him this question. I don't know if we would need to have a different advisory from the planning board to then go to the town council to change the advisory that was previously issued. I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head, which is why I wish the solicitor was here so I could ask him that. Because I don't want to run into a situation where someone says, oh, well, you didn't get an advisory opinion from the planning board that said that they wanted to do this instead of what they had previously said. I'm kind of like in uncharted waters here right now.
Yeah.
But
So,
isn't it the town councils, that they have the ability to, I mean, quite honestly, they can completely ignore our advisory recommendation and just say, no, we decided to prohibit these uses.
Gonna write that
This is
down.
why.
I don't know. That's the issue. I don't know the answer to that
Right.
question and I don't want to give a,
I thought a recommendation was advisory. Isn't it
Right.
just advisory?
it is, but I don't know if it's, I feel very uncertain about whether or not you would need to render an advisory.
All right, Counselor Madnix, you had your hand up?
Sure, I mean, I was gonna ask this to our admin clerk expert here. Is there anything in state law that prohibits us from putting effective dates on an ordinance? We say it's effective February 1st through May 30th. And it reverts back to the previous regulation.
So we can put effective dates on our ordinances. That would be like a sunsetting clause, so we're, as long as it's advertised in a way. The one concern I would have is, I think, reverting back, there would be no public notice
Mm.
on those provisions, and I don't think that would meet. Because it's a zoning item. If it wasn't a zoning item, I don't think it would be as restrictive, but because it's zoning use specifically, I'm not sure of the reversion. I think we would have to go back, but you definitely can put effective date. Be temporary. Yeah, I'd have to think about that.
And one other point to what Chair of the Planning Board and Talia were speaking of. So we already have an advisory recommendation from the planning board. It's within the town council purview to accept that or not. Now, it's a very valid question to ask our solicitor if we would need another one. But the town council could have taken the advisory recommendation that we were given and decided to prohibit them without even going back to the planning board. Because at the end of the day, the town council has the ability to adopt or not.
I believe.
And
it
modify.
was Because the council received the advisory board that met that criteria. And during the public hearing, you can change that, and you could have made that decision that evening, however, you paused and reconvened. So I don't think that devalues that advisory, especially because some of those recommendations are enclosed in the direction you're going.
The advisory is still in force
Correct.
Yeah.
until we get a new one.
I believe.
Awesome. Mark, I see you wanted to chime in.
I had a question. I don't know if anyone knows the answer. Can we place a temporary moratorium on special use permit applications?
I think based upon how state law is constructed, no. Because it says if you don't have specific and objective criteria, then it's permitted. I think that we'd actually have to go through the act of amending the district use table to actually have that.
Yeah, because the problem with that is, I mean, if you have an S in one of those categories for a use code, you know, what does that become if there's a moratorium? It would probably become permitted. I don't know.
Just another idea, and I have no
Yeah.
problem amending my motion to make it clear that this is for the purpose of having the planning board go back and review all of those S's that we're temporarily changing to X's so that they can develop specific and objective criteria for them. So I have no problem amending my motion to add that caveat so it's clear on the record that that's why we're doing this. That we have no intention of prohibiting these uses permanently, but to protect the town, we need to do so temporarily until we have objective criteria.
All right. Go ahead, Erin.
So timing, I think it's important. We paused on the initial recommendations, so we could advertise as one component. So if you're going to put a pause temporarily to work, know that that would be a noticed public hearing cost, and then you would absorb that cost again to revert it back. Not that it's, I mean, because it's 3 consecutive weeks required for that ad, so it's in the 700 to 1,000 range price. Not that that's just something to consider, but we paused those other ones that we were ready to move forward based on tonight's decision. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, so seeing no other discussion, I guess we'll go for our vote. I usually do roll call, but with the group today, I'm going to switch to a raise of hands. All in,
Would you mind restating the motion? If someone's.
I didn't write it down. I could, who's taking notes today to read it back to us? Yeah,
Just want to make sure.
we're gonna ask our clerk to read it back to us. Thank you. It's okay, we're on tape, so it'll be more specific later, I guess, but
Mark, sure.
Mark,
Do you have? Did you?
I didn't write it down. I can.
you want to repeat it?
I can spitball it again. I'll probably come close. And I'll add the caveat.
Yes.
So I'll withdraw the prior
And I'll draw my motion.
the prior motion. So I'll make a motion that we ask town staff to add to the upcoming town council agenda seeking authorization to advertise amendments to chapter 18.16 of the use table to convert all use codes that currently have a special use permit to be prohibited temporarily to allow the planning board to consider developing specific and objective criteria for those uses. And the intention is to bring them back to be permitted by special use permit once those objective criteria have been established.
Second,
All
thank
right,
you.
you're welcome. So we have our motion in our second. Any further discussion?
I would just say, I don't know if you want to say the intention is to bring them all back by special use permit. Because I think we're going to want to revisit some of those uses and whether or not they actually require a special use permit. But I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to say that, that's fine, then we could still make a recommendation
Yeah.
during our workshop.
It's going to the council agenda next, so I don't think it'll affect the
Okay.
planning board.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so all in favor?
Are we all?
Yes,
voting?
we're gonna,
All
yes,
of us? Okay.
all of us voting?
And also, or just-
Yeah.
Voting.
Because it's a joint meeting, so everyone would need to vote.
That-
I have no idea.
Okay.
All right,
Can you just take that one?
I think I got everyone's hand up, no pressure,
Yes, separate agenda.
and it's unanimous. All right, so did we want to go through
I-
and ask questions on the topics
I
tonight?
think we should, as long as we have everybody here, because we know it is coming back to us, and I'm hoping we can jump right on this and kind of prioritize it and get something back to you quickly, so.
All right, so we wrote it down. We don't want to go through every single individual use, but we wrote it down based off kind of key or themes that the council was seeing. Starting with buffers and lot size and going into aquifer protection overlay, dark sky compliance. So was there, should I kick it over to the planning board for a specific question on our information?
So I think a few
I
of
just don't know what
Like,
to
for
say on them.
example, Buffers, I think we understand Dan's point, is
Okay.
that the last submission we provided to the council didn't have specific buffer sizes. I think we need to provide a size, even though knowing that a lot of times that's gonna depend on, you know, the actual situation, but I think, yeah, we need to say, if we're recommending a buffer, we need to say it's 20, it's 50, it's 100 feet, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It allows for a number on it, and if there's an unusual situation, they come to the planning board and we say, oh, geez, the corner's cut off, that's all right.
They can request a waiver or whatever, but we'll provide that.
And it would. Jim. Oh, you
Sorry,
sure,
go ahead,
Jim.
Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
trying
I
to
was
look
gonna
out.
add, I think buffer was also a vegetative buffer, because there were some instances where there were requests for that, but it didn't specify the size of the vegetative buffer, like no less than 8 feet of evergreen or whatever, so something like that gives a little bit of specificity. I think that'd be helpful.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just one thing to be careful of is when you look at the zoning ordinances and your dimensional regulations, right? So you can have certain setbacks on your properties depending on what type of use it is and where the zone is. So you have to look at, when you're looking at the buffer, your vegetative buffer, how deep that is, what it's going to consist of, and if it's in line with your dimensional regulations for where a structure is actually going to be placed on that property. You could have a dimensional regulation that's probably tighter than what your buffer is, but you just want to be careful that those are consistent. There are also other requirements within our zoning ordinances, depending on the specific zoning use, certain buffers, 25 feet, 75 feet, 100 feet. I think, unfortunately, every special use has to kind of be looked at individually, saying, well, if this is next to a house or if it's next to a business, if it's next to a business, depending on what the use is, do you need a buffer? If it's next to a residence, what's that buffer going to be? I think that depends on, so.
And we could try to put in some wording to explain that, without getting too detailed, yeah.
And as Pete said, I mean, someone, an applicant comes and says, hey, you know, this is a 200-foot buffer. We don't think we need that. Justify why you don't need a 200-foot buffer, and then you can waive it. But you don't want to go too small, because then they're bound by that minimum requirement.
Mhm.
Okay, and we'll try to be conservative.
All right, and then on, yeah, sure, Kelly.
I would just want to note that it's not a waiver, it would be a variance because it's arising from the zoning ordinance.
Ah.
Yes.
A waiver is relief from the land development and subdivision regulations. A variance is relief from the zoning ordinance. An adjustment is a relief from the Low and Moderate Income Housing Act.
We
Oh.
learned that last night.
And we are learning it today. Awesome. So would that be, moving on to the next one, which is lot size, would the,
Lot size.
It'd be the same,
It's-
anything-
It's similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to be able to recommend the specific number for lot
Right.
sizes.
sure, go ahead.
And that was one of the questions that I had raised about the lot sizes and looking at this more, and maybe consider this when you're looking at this. It seems to me like the dimensional requirements, the setback requirements, the requirements for certain sizes of certain things are really going to govern whether a use can be on a smaller lot. And whereas, so maybe you don't need a minimum lot size if all of the other requirements are going to determine whether you can do this or you can't. On the size of the lot that's there. So that's why, you know, the more I thought about it, like I said, the setback requirements and the other dimensional requirements might cover it, and you may not need to put a minimum lot size for certain things. You know, because, you know, again, some of these uses could be big, they can be small. So you could put something on a smaller lot, if it's a smaller size business, so just a food for thought.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'll just add a little bit more context. I think we talked about this at council meeting. So one of the things to consider is if you look at our zoning map, we'll just speak to residential zoning. So you got R1, R2, R3. I think the planning board generally knows this, but you can have R3 zone. So when you go to build a development, and if it's a standard yield plan, you're saying, all right, it's one house per 3 acres. But you can have flats within that R3 zone that are smaller than 3 acres. Makes things a little bit interesting, but that's why there can be some confusion on lot size. Because your lot size per our tax map might be smaller than what your actual residential zoning is. So you could have a 1 acre lot in an R3 zone.
Yeah, you may find that in little old mill villages.
And in future comprehensive plan developments where they have a bonus of three houses of an acre. So,
Any of our cluster or conservation developments, we have anywhere between a 1/4 acre to 1 acre in R2, R3 zoning. So then you have smaller plots by definition. That doesn't meet our zoning map requirements.
Awesome. All right, so we'll go on to the next one then, the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. This is one that I brought up because it just did not, some of them that were recommended to us just did not make sense. And we went through it when council went through line item by line item there for our first meeting that we discussed it. Because we have the Aquifer Protection Overlay and anything within that needs to comply with that ordinance. And then in addition to that, some of the special use permits had criteria that to me did not align with protecting our water, and there was no other zone in which it was required. And my example for that, I think, was general business, and there was a use that required sidewalks. And I was thinking to myself, why would I be concerned with sidewalks with a special use permit? And I'll use Stop and Shop as an example. The aquifer cuts right down the middle of Stop and Shop. So if you're at one entrance, you would be required to have sidewalks. And if you're at the other entrance, you would then not. And to me, it just didn't make sense. So I would just like to recommend the planning board, if you're requiring a special use permit for the aquifer protection only, that it then be related to protecting our water. And there were some examples really early on that followed that, that structure. So I didn't flag all of them. And I don't want to go through them tonight because, we have a lot to get through, but I can send it over or come to a planning board meeting and speak again, because I know I already said it publicly. So did anybody have any questions on the aquifer protection overlay?
Just a comment, I was noticing that there are some special uses or special use permit within aquifer overlay A and B, and I think the board needs to revisit some of these. For example, something like privately owned recycling facility is allowed by special use permit in aquifer overlay B. I mean, do we really even need to allow it there since we already have it, through special use permit and industrial? I mean, maybe we just say it's not permitted. Septic pumping business with vehicle storage, same thing. Do we really need to allow that in an aquifer overlay, or do we just say no? We don't need it. We have enough industrial land where we could put that if we needed it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or if you had specific criteria about protecting certain plastics from the water, I'm not even sure if that was one of the examples I had.
I'm just
It might have
thinking like some of these, like something like septic pumping business, is it really worth taking the risk of writing all this special use criteria for the possibility that somebody's going to put this in an aquifer overlay, and we're gonna want it there as a town? I don't know if it's even worth it.
Mhm.
But we can take a look. The board can take a look at those cases.
All right. Sure. Go ahead, Mark.
Phil, I would just ask you, when you're doing that, to maybe look at some that maybe should just be permitted or just use instead of special use permits.
Right, and I
There
was,
were a couple that I looked at, said, well, why is this need a special use permit in the aquifer overlay? So just, I think look at going both ways. Some maybe you want to prohibit and some maybe you just want to say whatever the underlying requirements are, that's what they will be in it.
yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, even things like equestrian centers, I mean, if we said it's underlying district and it happens to be in the aquifer overlay, well, we already have a lot of requirements for equestrian centers. And we have a lot of fairly strict requirements in the APOD, so is that sufficient to just allow it to be underlying and not necessarily a whole new set of criteria?
Go ahead.
Just some history. I mean, we went through this use code table like 5 times. And some of the reasons why we either prohibited or the special use is because at the time we were developing the ordinance, we weren't the experts and we hired a consultant. We weren't actually sure if we wanted something to be permitted with our new ordinance. We figured we'd let it lie, and at least with special use, it still allowed it, someone could come to us.
Mhm.
But I think now it's been a few years, we could probably, as a community revisit that. But again, as Talia said, even if we prohibit something in one zone or one overlay district, that's not stopping someone from saying, hey, I have an idea. Let me apply, let me come to the planning board and the community and discuss, here's how, I think we can do this and meet all the requirements for the community. So, as she said, this is all flexible, but you want to try to be somewhat conservative. You want to be careful.
Definitely. Thank you. Sure, go ahead, Talia.
I've mentioned this a couple of times, and while any relief that is sought as part of any application has to stand on its own merits, I've at least personally found that this planning board is very, very receptive to hearing from applicants and working with applicants to try and build a better mousetrap. So I don't, and that's not the case everywhere in the state of Rhode Island. There are certainly other planning boards that I know of that are much more stringent when it
Yeah.
comes to certain regulations. And so I think that if you were to look at the planning board's track record, you'd see that they're receptive to hearing from applicants.
Yeah.
So I don't think that if we were to prohibit certain uses, that again, as I mentioned earlier, that there is flexibility, that there could very well be people who come to the town who say, hey, I know that you just had this conversation about prohibiting this use, but we're interested in doing X and Y, and we have these parameters and these safeguards. Would you be interested in revisiting it? I think that that's totally within the realm of possibility.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And thank you to the planning board for being awesome.
We had that discussion with the economic development committee also. Obviously, that's the concern, is we don't want to be too restrictive so that we're not encouraging economic development. But like Talia said, there's always, if somebody comes to us with something that we don't allow in a certain zone, it doesn't mean we can't work with them to change the zoning or in some other way fit it in there.
Awesome. So on to dark sky compliance. Down to Jim.
Yeah, thank you. This is one of the ones that just jumped out. And I think what it was is dark sky compliance was listed on several different uses, but it seemed to be at least inconsistent that some had it, some didn't. So we were trying to figure out why some had it and not. And I know that from a dark sky compliance, for an applicant to measure compliance to dark sky compliance, is pretty much they're buying the equipment that is from a certified dark sky compliant vendor. Is that, or how do they actually measure? There was no parameters on whether they were, like, who's taking the measurements to make sure they're in zone?
So generally, if it's a larger development, yeah, I mean, the way you show compliance is you have to have a photometric analysis done, which will show that you don't have your light trespassing into like another property. Generally, that's not a big thing. Generally, any lighting manufacturer or distributor that you're buying the lights from will provide that for you free of cost. I guess where we'd have to be careful is if it's some really small development, yeah, we don't want to make the requirements so stringent that they have to go and hire, say a consultant for $10,000 to do that lighting analysis, but.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think also there were areas, I think, the Wyoming area, fell under that as well. And I'm sure you guys will make the right recommendations. You just want to make sure that, that you could have the dark sky compliant regulations as well as allow businesses to have the appropriate signage. You guys know that better than I do.
Yeah, that's-
Pete, you wanted to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I know that, some developers a number of years ago have complained about the need for dark sky compliance. However, bottom line, this is 2026. It's come a long way. And basically, a dark sky compliant light is pretty simple. It's got a shield over it, so the light comes out horizontal or down. It's got a color temperature of 3000 K or less, which is important. It's a warm thing, and it does more than just, let you look at the stars. It has to do with, it changes what migratory birds do. It changes circadian rhythms in animals and humans. And it's energy efficient. And now in 2026, they're readily available. I mean, you look around, they're everywhere. It's just a proper design. It's very efficient because it shields the light down. And, I'm, not a strong proponent of it. I would love to see it on, required on residential because it's so inexpensive. But I know we're not going there
Yeah,
yet.
residential light kind of stuff, but.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
Like-
someday times will change and,
Yeah.
communities are gonna do that in residential.
Like he said, with the advent of LED lighting, almost every light fixture you buy for a parking lot now is pretty much dark sky compliant.
Yeah, and moving, I think what council had discussed with moving forward with dark sky compliance was not having it be a part of our special use permit,
Right.
but creating its own ordinance, because it's very important, I think, to the residents, because we care about environment as well as economic development. It's not hard to get. That's where we had left it. And I believe that did go to the planning board, and the planning board, when I listened to the meeting, seemed to agree. But that's why we're here again, to make sure we
Think-
flesh these things
I
out.
think, you don't hold me to it, but I think I can probably volunteer to write a draft dark sky compliant ordinance. And not make it overly restrictive so that it's going to really severely impact our small developers. And then bring that to the board, and then we could review it and then send something to
Yeah.
council. But yeah, I
You
think.
you
the
said
idea-
don't hold you to it, but it's in the record
Okay,
now.
that's right.
I just want to
I did
follow
see
up.
Jim, and then I
Just-
saw Dan, then I saw Talia.
That's great, and I appreciate that. And I think, to Peter's point, Peter, what you're saying is probably a lot of the lighting I'm seeing today in these types of, commercial plazas is probably already dark sky.
Oh, yeah.
So it's standard practice. I just, that'll be helpful if you can just drop something.
The biggest culprit actually is our town hall, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's on the record.
Don't put that on the
You're
record.
good.
All
It's on the
right.
record.
Council around it.
Right here first.
I just want to point out that, one of the things that we discussed as a council, dark sky compliance is listed 2 or 3 places in our ordinances, in our land development subdivision regulations. And one of the things I pointed out is when you guys put that into the special use permit objective criteria, it's like, well, we kind of already have, you just need to point to where we put it in. And then I realized, when I was looking through it, that I think creating a separate document for it is probably a good idea, because it is
Yeah.
sparsely in there and you need to look for it. But the planning board always requires it anyway as part of that, because you just know where it is. But I think consolidating it, that's a good idea.
Yeah, just a specific ordinance will make it really simple, yeah.
Go ahead, Talia.
I was just going to say that I think that if you were to make specific regulations about dark sky compliance, they could either be an amendment to the zoning ordinance, or they could live in part of the land development and subdivision regulations. I think they could go into either place. I know that we're going to be looking at a lot of different design guidelines as the year progresses in relation to the land development and subdivision regulations. So we might be able to put something in there, or just take some of what Phil may or may not prepare, depending upon if
I'll put
we
something.
told him to it or not. We insert that into that component of our land development and subdivision regulations.
Yeah.
So
I'll put together the requirements and then we can decide, yeah, where we
Yeah.
want to put it.
I think as long as we have something that is readily understandable and readily enforceable, it can live in any part of our overarching regulations, whether it's the zoning ordinance or land development subdivision regulations.
Awesome. So we'll go on to seeing no other comments. Hours of operation, which I recall was a concern of mine under the aquifer. So I don't really know if it needs to be a separate discussion, but somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I remember seeing a few times hours of operation being restricted in the aquifer. I believe it was storage containers, which or storage facilities was the one that stood out to me. Because I was thinking of Stilson Road and only part of it's in the aquifer, the other part is not. And if we want to have a competitor, or not if we want, but if a competitor wants to set up there, we'd restrict the hours of one and not the other. It just didn't seem fair to businesses. So seeing no, yeah,
And hours of operation were restricted just because of the APOD.
exactly.
Okay, that's, but,
All right.
but you can't get everything, yeah.
Yeah, right. Parking requirements. What was our concern on that? I don't, might have been the same thing.
I think it was
Sure.
based on the size of the dwelling or the square footage of the dwelling, and it had different sizes of parking requirements.
Mhm.
Isn't that what it was?
Yes. So did the planning board have questions or direction needed on that?
It was just.
Or Councilor Madnick wants to go ahead?
I think for both hours of operation and parking, again, we have regulations in either the zoning ordinance or our land development subdivision regulations that talk to those. And so the question I think that we were trying to answer from the council's perspective is, do we need to have that detailed criteria for every special use permit that has the objective criteria on it? Or do we just point back to one of the documents we already have
Good point.
on very high level? It's like, why have it twice?
Right.
Just point to the section in the regulation, and be like, okay, just go look there. You have to adhere to this. Unless we feel that for certain special use permits, that we actually need tighter regulations than what was already in our regulations. I mean, hours of operation, I mean, that's already kind of built into our ordinances.
Awesome. Yeah, sure. go ahead, Michelle.
The hours of operation, so the ones that are in the aquifer protection overlay. So one example is like the car wash. It says limited if adjacent to residential uses. So I think with your comment before about making any APOD specific, that is one of them that is just in that one zone.
Yeah,
So we wouldn't need that because it has nothing to do with the APOD, right?
that makes sense, because it seems like it's regarding residential, if you're adjacent to that, which
It has
would make
nothing-
sense, because you'd want to not disturb the homeowners too much.
Right, but would we have it as a special use permit because, so it only has a special use permit in the APOD zone, so what your comment was earlier was that all criteria for those specific ones that are only in the APOD
Yes.
zone should be related to the APOD zone, so that would nix that one, right? Is that how I'm understanding?
It is the
what-
way I said it.
Okay.
But if the planning board felt that they had a reason to say, like, you know, we don't want a car wash that's operating during certain hours because it's near residential, I'd be flexible on something like that if there was a reason why, which, I mean.
But
if
it would be
it's-
just be in the APOD. So
Right.
that, yeah.
Right, again, so it
which
would make
makes
sense, because then if you're an industrial, you can have your car wash all night,
Right.
see? Yeah. That's where I got lost. I got so
Yeah.
stuck on this and I just, yeah.
It's just standardization.
Yeah.
Standardization.
I think an important thing to consider is that when you have the aquifer protection overlay is not an independent zone from other zoning designations. They overlap. So it's not as though there are things that happen in the APOD that don't happen in other places. They work together as two things. And if you look at our zoning map, you'll see the boundaries of where the Aquifer Protection Overlay District is
Yes,
and where it covers.
that's
And
correct.
So when you look at that, you'll understand where certain industrial properties are located within the APOD.
Right. No, I get that.
I'm not saying that I'm looking at you while I'm saying that, but I'm not like.
Okay,
I'm
I'm just like,
exclusively speaking to
okay,
you. I'm
like,
just,
all right, I get it.
I'm just for general commentary on the APOD. You know, the APOD does control.
Right, okay. So with that, then on to licensing. I think the concern of council during our discussions was why requiring licensing in certain places and not others? And was it really necessarily in our wheelhouse to require licensing? So I think it was just more of like a be sure.
Yeah, that was my comment. I mean,
Yes,
this is a
okay.
land use policy. This is not, doesn't have anything to do with business licensing. We have separate regulations for that. So I didn't think that we should have any licensing guidelines or regulations in a land use document. If there are licensing that needs to happen, that's gonna happen in a different entity within the government.
Yeah, thank you.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I know, I think Talia, when you develop these, I mean, I looked at some of the other towns. You know, because quite honestly, we were scrambling at first, like, okay, what can we use as like a basis, a template to like start establishing some of this criteria? And I can say, at least what I've seen is pretty much almost every town has their own approach to this. And quite honestly, a lot of the requirements that they've developed are pretty sketchy at best. So. But a lot of them do have, you know, licensing is a condition or requirement.
Go ahead, Tanya.
I did look at a lot of different communities
Yeah.
and also what the municipal technical assistance program drafts were. So that's where some of these things arose from. They don't necessarily make, you know, I was looking for information from a variety of different sources about what could potentially be palatable to both the planning board and the town council. So, you know, some places do have licensing as part of their special use permit criteria. Some places have hours of operation as part of their special use permit criteria. So I didn't like concoct all of this in my mind. Some of it came from research that I did,
Yeah.
what other communities are doing.
So
But-
some communities have the regulations set up differently than us.
Yeah.
In our position, I like the way, I've looked at a lot of communities, like, I like the way we have it set up because they're like separate governmental entities that handle these things. But yeah, some communities, they mix and match and it's hard to follow who's got jurisdiction on what. But I felt that we have a pretty solid foundation for both like the business licensing stuff and then the zoning and land use stuff. So we can probably keep these separate. But no, I agree with you. When I looked at some, I'm like, wow, these are really mixed and match. It's hard to follow. Ours are pretty simple compared to some communities.
And just another thought. So something like hours of operation, for example, going back to the car wash. If we did not specify hours of operation for a car wash, maybe this is a Chris and Gary question, but if we don't have that as requirements for the special use permit, but that special use permit is still gonna have to go through a development plan review, right? And during that development plan review and public hearings, the board determines that, hey, this car wash is adjacent to residential properties and we feel that we have to limit the hours of operation, otherwise it's gonna have a negative impact on, you know, the abutters. I think that would be like a valid finding of fact, and I think that would be defensible, so.
And it's,
And then I saw Michelle.
it's definitely a Chris and Gary question.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that from Chris, because if that's the case, then I think a lot of this stuff is kind of like this. A lot of these conditions and requirements are things that we typically develop during development plan review based on the, you know, the specific situation. And maybe we don't have to get so exact as far as things like hours of operation.
The example that I gave in relation to the hours of operation was if you were considering hours of operation specific to certain uses in certain zones. And one of the examples that I said was like, so right now you can have a private club in neighborhood business or the Shannick Village zone. Maybe you don't want the private club to be open until 2 a.m. in the
Right.
Shannick Village zone.
Mhm.
You know, that's the kind of thought process that I was having when I was thinking about
And-
those
yeah.
particular components. But again, I really think that we would need to have Chris weigh in on that specific component, because I don't know if we could necessarily dictate those kinds of things in the absence of regulations that,
I'm sure he'll
Cover
have
that.
a lot of comments as you guys go through it and
Yes.
have all your comments on each individual use. But I did see Michelle's hand. I didn't want to.
Yeah, so the car wash and then there was another one, warehouse sales with outdoor storage is another example that we had hours of operation listed. If limited if adjacent to residential uses. it's just an aquifer protection overlay subdistrict B. So they're permitted in the other areas, which means why would we have hours of operation if it's just special use permitted in aquifer? Is I think what I was going, like, cause there's a couple hours of operation that are just for APOD, but that doesn't make sense if it's permitted in other zones, right?
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be consistent.
Right, so I think that's my point with those, or I was piggybacking on your point on them, but.
Yeah, you get it.
Yes, okay, but I was trying to clarify.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to explain and sometimes what's best at explaining things. So I was like, I don't know if I'm not explaining this well, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Right, and I do agree, hours of operation for a club, if that, in a neighborhood or something like that, that would be something that we would write down, but a car wash specifically in the aquifer overlay district doesn't make sense to have hours of operation. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the.
Right.
Right, okay.
If we, just for 1 second, we gain this out for a sec. If we have a club, a special use permit, does that qualify as indoor entertainment? Which then has to meet the hours of operation of the license?
Club would have to get it.
I mean, that's one use that Michelle brought up. I mean, there are other ones that.
Yeah.
But I think to Phil's point, Sam's point too, is whether it's in the special use permit because of the APOD versus not. Things like that have to be consistent because it's irrelevant to the APOD. I think is the point. It's independent.
And honestly, Dan, when you start going through those zone use tables, you start at the top and everybody's really sharp around, 6:30, 7 o'clock. By 8:30, we are like, yeah, whatever, put an S there, put it up. I'm being honest, right? But now that we've decided it's probably coming back to us, we're just gonna have to take the time and quite honestly, when we get to that point where we're all fatigued, we're gonna drop it and then pick it up at the next workshop and,
Yeah. Set a time cap to your meeting.
yeah. Exactly.
Just gonna say that. So we've covered all the things like we already wanted to cover, but we did have a spot just in case anybody had new concerns, new questions. Or if you want to go back and ask questions about things we already discussed, does any planning board member or council member have something?
I'll add
Yeah.
something real quick. So I kind of said this earlier, but whatever we decide as a community, like we own the decision we make. And one of the things I keep pointing back to, and I know some of the councilors always get on me for this, but we always have to go back to our comprehensive community plan because that's something that we're all beholden to. And as you're looking through this, I mean, the town may decide that some of these uses that we were allowing for special use permit, especially some of the more industrial uses. And that's why I thought the zoning map, having that up is important because we have 25,000 acres in this community. I think we've got about half of it is developed and another 6,000 of it is in conservation. I think we've got between 1,000 and 1,200 acres devoted to some kind of commercial entity between, neighborhood business to industrial. And so you really got to consider, based on the comp plan and what the community actually wants in Richmond and what we still have influence and some control over. But that doesn't mean that we can't change it in the future. Like I said, I mean, I typically like to be a little more conservative, not to be anti-development, but just to make sure that, for lack of a better term, we don't get caught with our pants down, where we get a rubber manufacturing facility next to a residential development. I mean, I don't think anyone in this room wants that, right? But obviously, we've got industrial areas where that is permitted. But one of the caveats with that is we have residences right next to industrial areas. So, just things to think about when you're going through this and you're looking at making special use permits either prohibited or permitted. Going back to the comp plan is what exactly does this community want in their community? That's kind of how I look at this holistically.
Right, I think the other thing the board needs to do is, we really need to take a hard look at the zone itself and what the intention is, neighborhood business. I know neighborhood business is it's supposed to be a zone that serves really kind of the immediate area for day-to-day services, not kind of something that serves necessarily the bigger community. So although like something like, I don't know, like maybe a place of worship, I mean, we have it listed as a special use permit in neighborhood business. And I know like the EDC kind of, recommended that we do that, so we don't limit like where places of worship are, but honestly, like, is that really how we want to consume our inventory of neighborhood business property? Knowing that there's all these other places you could put that.
Yeah,
So I think we need to look at that also.
Definitely.
I'll point out one thing, Phil and I had this interesting conversation regarding cemeteries. So some cemeteries are permitted or special use, and I thought about that for a second. Well, as a Richmond resident, do I really want any more cemeteries in our town? Either one, to take away some maybe land that could be conservation, or land that could be commercial industrial development, or land that could be residential. I mean, maybe I just picked it because cemeteries are where dead people go, with all due respect, and there's not really much use out of it for the town. They're just there, and we already have a number of cemeteries. I think that's just, I'm picking on that one because I just look at it and be like, what benefit do you get?
Yeah.
There's some
Fairly rare.
benefit. There are planned cemeteries and paths and people go and walk. It's a relatively safe place. You walk your dog, you
Good point.
can. When you pick up after them, and
Yeah.
I think it's part of a different kind of, we'll say recreation, but
Right.
you know what I mean?
I'll tell you, Sam.
I think that is a use that should be permitted with a special use permit. I think that there are a lot of different components to the development of a cemetery that would benefit from specific guidance.
Mhm.
Like, I don't think that you should be able to put a cemetery on a 1 acre lot. I think that that is unconscionable. How are you going to make sure that you're not going to be engaging in, a cemetery right next to someone, like a funeral right next to someone's house? It's just-
Yeah.
I think that that's the kind of thing where you do need to have parameters for it. I don't think it should necessarily just be a permitted use.
Yeah.
I
That-
guess, to Dan's point, something like a cemetery, okay, it's allowed in, say, R3 by a special use permit. If we had, say, a tract of like, I don't know, 200 acres of R3 property that is zoned for future development of housing to meet the needs of this town. Does the town really see a benefit in developing that as a cemetery, basically clear cutting pretty much the entire parcel of, whatever, 100, 200 acres, in a residential zoned area to put, like Dan said, dead people? Is that really in the best interest? I mean, me personally, I would say I'd be fine not permitting it at all, but.
Yeah.
It has hiking trails.
Well, to Andrea's point, I did log a lot of miles when I lived in Exeter over at St. Joseph's Cemetery. It was a safe place for people to go. Taught my kids to ride bikes there.
Oh, they're great.
I think it has its place, but to your point, don't want to clear cut
I
either.
taught my kids how to drive over at the VA
Yeah.
cemetery because they can't kill anybody. They're already dead.
I see Jim's hand. Yep.
No, I understand and agree with a lot of what you're saying, Phil. I would just say that if someone came forward and said they wanted to put a golf course in, which would occupy potentially buildable land, then we would take a different approach. So it's just, I kind of think of it, a golf course is used differently than a cemetery.
Are cemeteries tax exempt?
I don't know. I don't go to them a lot, but my point is, I think if it's a special use
Good
permit.
luck
then
collecting from the residents.
yeah. But, yeah, fortunately, people aren't knocking down the doors to build cemeteries here all the time. I don't think so. I don't know, but,
But that's, see, Jim, that's the issue. Like, is the board, when we go through these, especially late at night, we're always sitting here thinking like, how do we protect the town from this developer that comes in and just says, hey, yeah, where can I put a cemetery? And they've gone through all the other towns, like, I don't have a spot. Hey, Richmond, I can do it there. Let's do it. It's like, so we're always thinking worst case and how can we, avoid risk, for
Absolutely.
too much risk, for the town.
You can put it in West Shannon Road, it's already dug up.
There's been a lot of bodies in there, haven't they?
So just making plans on where you're gonna store bodies. Great.
Well,
again, on the record.
All right, I think we've addressed all new concerns. Speak now or hold your peace or share your piece later. So So now we want to go on to expectations of council. Phil and I thought this was important to put, and staff as well, to put this on the agenda so we can just create a clear timeline of what's expected and when we can have something. Not that they're tied to it, but it's always just good to know when something will come to us.
Is there any way within this process that, because we have to, public hearing and everything, that we can sort of look at some of the things that we're really most concerned about and work on this first and sort of have it just all have to be done all at once? Or, I mean, does it all go to the council and get voted on at once, or can we do a section of it?
I don't see why we,
Another section,
Yeah, I
another
think-
section,
that'd be a answer for experts.
just to cover the,
You could segment it, but then you will be incurring advertising costs.
Yeah.
Which could be substantial. I wouldn't want to have a public hearing where you're just talking about 1 or 5 use codes. I don't think that you'd be getting good bang for your buck.
believe me, we gotta advertise for public hearing.
Yeah.
And work through this stuff, and however long it takes us, all I'm saying is that let's work on the ones that we're most scared about first, and that shouldn't preclude us from sending a chunk of it to town council, getting them to approve it, and then as we're still working on the other sections, right?
No, I'm not saying that you should be precluded from doing that. I'm just putting a bug in everyone's ear that there are costs associated with doing this. So if you're going to be doing it, you should be trying to do a sizable chunk at a time.
Sure,
Yeah.
either way, we have to do the advertising for the chunk of it, right?
Peter, I'm also thinking that, based on the fact that we've gone through this one time, we got a lot of feedback from council. I think we have a whole better direction right now of what we want to do. I think we should be able to get through this in like one submission, but I guess if we start getting into it and it turns out that, this is taking way longer, then maybe we.
I guess
Also,
I'm not.
I just want to add
You're
something.
estimating size. Go ahead.
So, council is going to potentially we're putting it on our agenda to discuss prohibiting all these uses anyway, so there's no reason to be scared or prioritize certain ones over the other, because we're gonna be going forward with the protection of the town where nothing can happen until we've gone through this. And my concern with doing it in chunks and then some later is sometimes if you review something and then you're reviewing something maybe similar later on, you might say, oh, wait, I want to change that one that council already approved, and then you're re-advertising it anyway. So for that reason and the advertising reason, I just think it would make sense to see it all at once.
Okay,
But yeah,
like I said, I don't have a good feeling for like how long it's really gonna take, and that's sort of where we are at this point. We thought it wasn't gonna take that long, and we realized. It's gonna
Yeah.
take long.
but I
I'm not
also,
good at estimating that. so.
yeah, I also trust the planning board. So if you guys feel like you need to change your mind, go for it. Yeah, everybody tell you? Yeah, and then Jill again.
A big part of it is also going to be that we're going to be balancing this continued review with applications that we receive and with other amendments that we're going to be considering. So, it's not going to be something that's done overnight. It's going to be something that will probably take, maybe I'm trying to kind of angle for like March or April. But
More like April.
But yeah, but it would really depend upon, again, like just the flow of applications, because I don't want to tell an applicant, no, I'm not going to put you on for this meeting because we're going to be talking about special use permit criteria,
No.
even though we don't have an explicit danger right now.
Need to do though.
So,
Excuse me one second, Jim. So in the past, when we had things like comprehensive plans update, we were adamant that we were gonna take the second meeting, make that our workshop, and that's all we were going to put on that agenda. And unless something is like incredibly critical that we really have to respond to, the schedule of putting applicants on for, public hearings, whatever, it's not gonna be on that workshop night. And then we're just gonna have to make that workshop.
I saw Jim, then Aaron, then back to Talia. Sorry, I want to make sure everyone can be heard.
Unless, did you want to finish the thought there? I mean, I can wait.
You-
All right. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say too, last night, I believe the planning board did also accept, or they approved the prioritization of the topics that we're gonna be working on for this year. So those are important for us to take into consideration too. I know that the design standards was one of the ones that was at the top. I want to make sure that you guys are facilitated to be able to do that work, because I think that's very important as well. So I would say I trust the guidance of the planning board. You can set the recommendation of timeline. if that timeline slips a little bit, I will respect that. I mean, I understand things happen. I think also as long as we're able to manage the needs of the public and the business community as far as how things go forward, we'll figure it out. But I think you guys are in the right seat to make the decision. We'll work with you on that.
Awesome. I know we have admin. I don't remember who I said first and second though. Sorry, I think it was Aaron then Talia or Talia then Aaron.
I just, one thing that you need to really consider when you're trying to figure out the disposition of each meeting is that now under changes to state law, comprehensive permit applications, when you have a pre-application, if it is submitted and it is, and they don't have a pre-application within a certain number of days, they can then immediately file whatever next stage they're going to file. They can file an optional master plan or they can file a preliminary plan application. And I just mention that because there are going to be some times where we're going to have meetings where there's going to be an application on that potentially because of those various variables. So I can certainly try to make it so that things fall into that kind of place, but the state has a lot of different ideas that they have given to the towns.
Yes. Definitely, Aaron.
So something to consider, because I was backtracking the advertising, if council authorized the advertisement next Tuesday, that requires 3 weeks. We're not gonna hit our February meeting. 3 weeks from that brings us to normally when council would meet, however, they're not meeting because it's school vacation week and or that it probably would be a popular item to put on during school vacation week. So then you're looking at the next earliest would be the following. And then would be,
Which
if you did a special meeting the last week in February, the next regular meeting is the 3rd of March of council for a public hearing, but that's the same night as the school public hearing where we're starting at 5. You don't want to add it
Yeah.
to there. So you guys are kind of in the March frame if you're going to advertise to prohibit. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay.
I know you referred it, but it's something council can discuss more, but you know, you're not going to prohibit anything till probably, unless you do a special meeting, the end of February, if not middle March.
Which we should really be figuring out on Tuesday. If we choose to advertise. So it might be something we all check our calendars and see if we can get that special meeting in. Yeah. All right.
So that being said, is there any way the board can work on a recommendation without having the? Okay. So we don't need, we don't need the council to formally request us work on that. That's something we could do, right?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Let's start thinking about that, getting that on our workshop agenda. And at least, yeah, then we'll be a little ahead of the game, at least we won't have to wait.
All right. So it sounds like, anybody have questions on the timeline? All right. I think we've gotten through our whole agenda. Awesome.
Great.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Second.
Awesome. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your work on this and it's all appreciated. So we'll do all in favor.